Hi, my name is Miles Newman and welcome to the online Staying Engaged session for Tuesday the 14th September 2021. In this session we're going to look at how to do video reviews with Mark Louis, Paul Mercer and Shane Ossip. This session came about following discussion between the training managers across Australia. We were looking for techniques we can all use to improve our officiating and also how we can keep engaged with football. Mark Louis suggested that as Queensland officials have been participating in weekly video reviews of their games for the last 3 seasons, we could discuss the process they use and talk about the outcomes they achieve and look at some of their review plays. This sounded like an excellent topic, so we set our agenda for tonight. Paul Mercer will start with an introduction and purpose of game reviews. Then, Mark Louis will give you an overview of the typical QGOA participation over the past 3 years. After that, Shane Ossip will look at the process of selecting and curating plays. Finally, we have some plays from last year to work through. So, let's get going.
So I'm not going to bore you to death with death by PowerPoint, but I've just got a few slides to run through. And we're just going to talk about why we do game reviews and what we can get out of them. So it's a useful resource for both Miles from a training opportunities point of view, as well as enabling us to give information and feedback to officials that hopefully will lead to improved individual performance, enable better decision making, and higher quality decision making, and help us to become more consistent across the country. So what do we look for? Reviewers should be looking for 3 things. We look for individual errors because we need to know what we've done wrong so that we can address any issues. We need to look at situations where we can improve on what we're doing, and we certainly want to highlight examples of good behaviours, good decision making, good actions, good behaviours, those type of things. So really those are the things that we want to focus on, and if we confine ourselves to those sorts of things, we should be able to achieve positive outcomes. So obviously we need to benchmark whatever we do, and everything that we do should be in accordance with the playing rules that we're using, plus the application of mechanics, philosophies and principles contained in the MOFO. So everything should be referenced back to that. So individual states or individual leagues, individual officiating groups might do their own thing in terms of certain mechanics or things like that, but just understand that any reviews are done in accordance with the national standards. And so if a comment is made that an official hasn't done this correctly or according to the book or something like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were wrong, because by their local application they weren't, but at a national level that's not what we want to see them be doing. And then how do we provide feedback? So we should break it down into 3 areas. General observations, so that can be things related to the game itself or to the crew in general. So the crew hustle might have been terrific, or their signalling as a crew might have been great. We want to talk about positional feedback, and we want to give notes on specific plays that highlight the sort of things we're talking about. And the intention should always be to focus on the work, not the person. We don't want to make this personal. We want to say that anybody who could be working that position could face those same challenges and issues. We need to provide both general and specific suggestions. So anything that we make an observation about, we should be able to quantify or qualify that and suggest or provide information that will help them do it better or improve next time. So we need to provide specific solutions if we highlight any issues. And ideally, we always want to try and find something to compliment them on, recognise something they have done well, the more the better. And finally, we want to try to avoid telling someone that they were wrong. Nobody likes being told that they are wrong, but we have to find ways of doing that without making it seem to be a put down or making it demotivating. Any comments on any of that?
I
might say on that regard there, Paul, if you ask the right questions, instead of saying you were out of position here, you should have been over there, say, tell me why you were at their position. Let the person explain why they were there. Maybe they saw something that pulled them out of position that they want to take a harder look at. And then if they say, well, I decided to be there because I thought it was a better position, then say, do you think it might have been better if you'd been over here? So ask them, let them explain themselves first to see what their thought was, and then give them your thought as to where they might have, should have been, and let them see on their own. I think they learn faster when they're thinking it out themselves, thinking through why they were where they were and why we think they should have been in another place.
And that's an excellent point, Bob. Certainly, wherever we might be saying something that might be perceived as critical or as a downgrade or whatever you want to call it, we should certainly be giving them the opportunity to explain, because we're not there. We can only make an observation based on what we see on video. We don't hear what's said necessarily, and we need to understand these things before we make comments. So they should always be given the opportunity to comment in those situations. Totally agree. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think in my experience of going through the video reviews over the last couple of years, it's important. I just want to emphasize how important it is to mix up the type of review plays, because it can get very demotivating over the course of an evening to just see criticism after criticism. It's a lot easier to pull out of a game things that didn't go right, but it is really important from an overall perspective to make sure there's a mix of both positive and negative plays.
And one of the things I'd like to highlight from that is that as we move forward and get better at this and learn more about this through our own experiences, I certainly agree that that ought to be a focus, that we need to be looking at things, positive reinforcement.
I might also add that, and I'm sure Shane's heard the same thing, that I've always been told when you're doing a review, never give more than 3 negative points and always give 3 positive points. In other words, if you're going to give negative points, you must give positive points, and you should finish off on the positive, because you've got to not only kind of say, hey, you can do this better, and I very much like the way Bob was talking, how do you think you could do it better? But you should always finish on that positive point, because you want them to come away with a positive point of view and come back to you for more later on, more guidance, more coaching.
Yep, well said, Miles. Good points all. Okay, so across the next 12 months, obviously during the last lockdown, I spent a lot of time watching videos from various states around the country and providing feedback and those sorts of things. And it's something I want to engender and build on across the country, getting more people involved over the next 12 months. And so these are things we'll learn along the way as to how to do these things better. That's all from me. I'm going to stop my share and hand over to Mark.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Just to pick up on one of the things we talked about first, Brian and Paul, and I think all of us agree that it's important to balance the positive and the negatives. One of the things that I found going back through the last 4 or 5 weeks of reviews from last season is that whilst we did manage to curate a reasonable number of positive plays, one of the things that I found coming out from there was that the time we spent discussing or reviewing the positives was significantly less than the place where there were issues and where improvements could have been made. So I think we've got to learn how to draw more from the positives. I think it's easy to find the positive examples and to talk about them, but then what else do you talk about in it? And that's one of the problems which I don't think we've managed to address and overcome yet. And that's why I think a lot of the sessions, a lot of the time that we spend on the reviews does seem to be a bit on the negative side. Not that we've got more negative plays, but the amount of time spent is not proportional. So that's something which we need to work on. Now, as Miles said in the introduction, QGOA has been running weekly review sessions for the last 3 seasons, generally drawing from games of the last weekend. QGOA does have the advantage of split seasons with North Queensland and Southeast Queensland. So last year, for example, in 2020, we were able to put on 21 different sessions over the year on this. Typically, we would get a core of about 8 to 10 regular attendees. And in order to promote national consistency and to get views from other states, QGOA invited Paul and Brian Curry to join us to provide an external, another state's view of what is going on. And that's been very helpful. I think that's a good way of us moving forward on an AGOA basis and looking at running something nationally. Some of the sessions, the largest number of attendees we had last season was 21 participants, and the smallest was 6, so fairly wide range of attendees. One of the things that I think we haven't done well is managing the amount of time we spend on each play. There were some plays, some particularly contentious plays, where we did spend over an hour on one play. And we were rehashing a lot of the things over and over again without being able to cut off the discussion and to move on. So that's something which, again, from my perspective, we need to learn to do better. Our sessions would typically go for about 2 hours, probably an hour 45, 2 hours on average each week. Some sessions went for about 3.5 hours. There were some sessions that were pushing midnight by the time we finished. And going that far, people started to get a bit more emotional and frustrated as the night wore on. So I think we've got to also keep that in mind. We worked on the basis of trying to curate and review 12 to 15 plays a night. Sometimes it was easy to find those, other times it wasn't quite so easy to do that. A lot of the curation of games was done by Shane. So Shane's going to be talking a bit about that process after me. On the whole, though, one thing that I did notice was the consistency amongst the officials did improve noticeably. When we could look at video all through it on judgment calls and have more than half of the Queensland officials discuss it and listen to the calling officials, the consistency did improve over that period of time, and I would expect that to continue. And I'd hope that on a national basis we would see that improvement in consistency as we start to roll this sort of activity out nationwide. Last thing I want to say before handing over to Shane, one of the things we established very early on was to always refer to the officials by position rather than by name, even if they were there in the session, to try to remove some of the, what Paul was mentioning, some of the personal criticism. So one of our rules was basically no one on the video is referred to by name, only by the position they were working. On the whole, an activity which I think has significant benefit and which I would strongly encourage states to either adopt within the state or on a national basis. or both. I don't know how we would move forward with this nationally, but hey, let's have a look. So I'll hand over to Shane to talk about the curation process. And then after that, we've gone through some of the plays from last year, and we've highlighted 6 plays to show you tonight, to give you a bit of a feel for what we look at and the sorts of discussions that we could have.
Mark, just before you do that, perhaps one comment on what you've said. As we both said, you refer to people by position when we're talking about reviewing players. I think there's one exception to that, and I think where we've got a situation where we are looking to praise and recognise positive behaviour, I think it's good to call the person out by name and really give them that buzz of reinforcing, hey, Shane, you did a great job on this call or this coverage or whatever the case may be.
So very quickly, thank you, Mark, and also Bob specifically. You've stolen 2 of my points in my notes here, which is great. What I'll go through very quickly is just the curation of plays. So that's kind of 2 parts. There's the technical, actual getting the plays together and piecing them and actually then getting them uploaded. And then also just some principles that I've applied over the last couple of years when it comes to selecting plays. Obviously, I know our demographic is quite broad, but it's sometimes in the older side of things, people that have ex-players a little bit potentially long in the tooth. So one of the biggest challenges that I've seen within our playing group is finding willing volunteers that are, 1, willing to give their time up on top of officiating games over a weekend, and then 2, spending time, selecting these plays and then having to use technology to enable that. From a technical perspective, there's really 3 things that I personally use when I'm coming to select footage. First of all, you need to have access to it. In the past, it was quite problematic. It used to be teams would only upload their footage to Huddle, and then getting that off Huddle or via other methods was quite problematic. With live streaming, especially in Queensland during the playoff series, it's now starting to get a lot easier to access information either directly from the production team or from YouTube itself if it's uploaded to YouTube. That's the first tool, is getting access to the actual live footage or the best quality footage possible. The second bit is actually being able to review the footage and then cut it up. There's multiple methods that can be used. I personally use a tool called VLC. It's quite a popular media player that does have the ability to also clip video as you're watching it. I'll be the first to admit that it's not the best app for doing it, but that's what I use for myself. There is multiple other options that's probably best used by the user. The last tool that I have to use is the Rulebook. I think it's absolutely critical that, when we're looking at clips and understanding what we're trying to find, that we understand the reason why we're collecting it. The reason why I say that is when it comes to labeling the actual clips once you've selected them, is that we always like to use the foul codes and the positions of the players. So for example, DPI B55 as part of the title of the thing. And obviously for junior officials, that might also be a great tool to actually prompt them to get into the rule book and start understanding the rule you're looking up, why you're pulling it up as a potential observation, and what's the correct foul code for it. So those are the 3 things I think from a technical perspective that you need: is the footage, the method for selecting it and or downloading it and editing it, and then the rule book. The next piece is just understanding why you're clipping and selecting video clips. Is this part of a weekly review like we do in Queensland? Is this part of a crew specific review as part of a state representative evaluation? Or is this a tool that's being used to develop brand new officials? I think it's important to understand the objective of why you're doing this, because that kind of dictates how particular or how nuanced you are in terms of being selective on the plays. So for example, if it's a brand new crew or it's a less developed league, potentially you might want to select some very basic plays and really focus on maybe 4 or 5 clips, and especially have 3 or 4 positive outcomes, and then 3 or 4 constructive criticisms. Whereas if you've got an experienced crew that's doing, or a league that's doing 4 or 5 games a week, potentially, like Marcus said, we can go through 12 to 15 clips in a single session, and it might be a little bit painful, but it's definitely achievable. The last couple of points I want to touch on is just some general principles on what then attracts my attention to looking at clips. So as I'm watching the game film, I'm obviously fast forwarding in between all the dead air. I'm just getting to the pre-snap 3 seconds before the quarterback snaps the ball. And then what I'm looking for is for at least one obvious thing. What kind of we find is sometimes it's very easy in a single play to see all of the problems, or all of the issues, or, multiple things happening. I think what should be evident from a clip that you select is that the discussion point should be clear. Even if the actual footage of the foul may not be as clear, and a lot of the cameras that we have, it's a single camera from a long distance away. Sometimes you're not going to be able to see the DPI, but the clip, when you're viewing it, there should be no doubt, hey, this is a clip and the focus of the discussion is on the DPI. I'd also remind that the focus of the discussion is not always at the point of attack. Sometimes, it can be the positioning of an official that's on the deep pylon when the ball is being run in. So don't always focus on the ball carrier. Always, when you're looking at a clip, look at how the officials around the play, boxing in when the ball goes outside of bounds. Sometimes it's easy to find positive outcomes when you're not looking at the point of the attack. Look for people that are putting in the extra 5% off the ball, so to speak. So, for example, it could be just, the body language of the crew deep in the fourth quarter. You can still see the back judges right on it, making the appropriate signals. Highlight those kinds of things that are off the ball, because it really just reemphasizes the fact that we're trying to find some positive outcomes. The last point I want to talk about is just, at the end of the day, we want to improve our officials, but the best way to do that is through positivity. And thank you for all of you who've already mentioned this, that really we should be looking to provide positive outcomes that may come through objective criticisms, but at the end of the day, no one feels good being told that they're bad. So we just need to make sure that we present everything in as positive and a constructive light as possible. And I had this highlighted in my notes that where possible, we try not to highlight the individual by name. We talk about the position on the field. And what we've always found is that if that person's in the group and they're quite comfortable to discuss it, because there are 2 types of people really, they'll identify themselves as hey, I was the head linesman, and then they'll go into the discussion. So they'll volunteer themselves, and then that gives permission for the rest of the group either to address it directly or to still talk in that third person kind of thing. So I think we've worked that quite well in Queensland. It becomes part of the behaviour. I just think that's just a great way going forward. And then if the person volunteers themselves, that gives you permission to kind of then talk more candidly or more openly. That's all I have from a curating views point of perspective. I'm happy to hand back over and we can go through some reviews, I think.
So this was a wrap for the field judge and the back judge. I just like the way that they work together on this. I like the movement by the back judge in that he leaves his centre field position and starts to bracket the play with the field judge. They're both decisive with their call, and they get together and they communicate, and one of them gives the signal to the referee. So everything about it from that point of view was well done for me. Unless anybody's got any comments, we can move on.
One thing I did notice is the deep wing up the top was just starting on the goal line. I don't know if the deep wing down the bottom started on the goal line and drifted back. Would be interesting to he looks like he's still at the back of the end line. So just an interesting observation on the mechanics.
Yep. So we did note that at the time, but from this, when we showed this play, we wanted to focus on the positives.
Yep. Cool.
Good observation. Great, good pickup.
The other part that I'll also just jump in here is that, especially with regular season footage, we don't always get the referee announcements, but because this is one of the playoff games, we're also quite lucky enough to focus in on the referee. I'm not naming the referee. He can identify himself if he wishes, so I'll just play this one out.
Boo, boo.
Pass interference. Defense number 13. Foul occurred in the end zone. Ball will be placed on the 2-yard line. Automatic first down.
This was a crew of 8, wasn't it, Mark?
Great announcement.
Yes, it was a crew of 8.
It would be nice to have announcements that are easy to do. We have the same travels in New South Wales. It's like you got to keep looking at it to see whether it's on or off. It's just one of these days it'll become automatic.
Yeah. All right, so this is a kickoff, and we've got a kick going towards the sideline. And we've got a flag on the play from our official at the receiving team's restraining.
Just out of curiosity, is this a 90-yard field?
Yes,
Would this have been kicked from the 30? That looks like it's 45-yard, 90-yard field.
I'll add that
Yes.
we
Yes
didn't
and
get
yes.
the start of this play because this is when the actual footage cut to the live play. They were in a replay, just to show you, I think it was like the previous touchdown or the point after attempt. And so this is when the live footage cut in. So we do miss the kickoff.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the alignment of the officials and just trying to work out. It looks like it's a 45-yard
Correct.
half field.
Correct. 45, the halfway is 45.
Yep.
So why would we have a flag on this play?
Out of bounds without being touched by Team B.
Okay, so how far does this play run, Shane? Does this continue to run?
Yeah, I can't remember if they actually show the full footage. I think that's pretty much the best of it. I'll let it run.
Okay. Okay, no, that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, just let it run so we see what transpires. I particularly want to see the team on the sideline, but there you go. Oh, we are going to get a replay.
Does it go 10?
It certainly goes 10, yeah.
Yeah. That was what I was trying to clarify when I was trying to watch it on the sideline.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it goes. Yeah.
Here's a real semantic question for you, Paul, or for anybody. Question for that. If you're throwing a flag for, whether it's gone out of bounds without being touched, and it's the same spot as the Team A player is on the sideline, obviously you're not going to throw the flag at the team player right there. Would you tend to throw it inbounds or outbounds in line with where it's gone across the sideline?
I'd like to see it at the spot where the ball went out of bounds.
Like right there at the player? That's all I was just asking, because it looks
Yes,
like
but
it goes
you can hold it for 2 or 3 seconds until the players have rolled off.
So what we just saw there was the flag being waved off.
Yeah.
Just throw it at the player. Let them know there's a foul.
Okay.
So the issue with this play was that this was about communication. So we originally had a flag for a free kick out of bounds. Then there was some discussion, or the calling official had a second thought, I can't remember which, and the flag was picked up because it had been touched before it went out of bounds. The problem was it was touched by a kicking team player, so the foul should have stood. So that was just one of those where we sort of knew the rule, but we didn't quite know the nuances of it.
Can you pause that there for a second, Shane? remember we're talking about framing this film. Now, I'm bringing this up because I've been filming games. This is a good example. If you've got somebody who's filming the game, we can't see the near sideline. So there might be something happening on this sideline. So if you've got some kind of control on this, this is something to keep an eye on. We can't see that near sideline. We can't, yes, I think we can see we can see both teams, but we can't see what's happening on this sideline. So, and the problem actually that happens then, if you try to get your cameraman to draw back so you can see both sides, you're actually beginning to lose detail. So it's something you have to play with if you're doing the filming. If you want to film and then generate the same material yourself, it's just something to be aware of. And the score and everything looks fabulous, but it sometimes can block out what the hell's going on.
Point in the game, there's much point in having.
Did you want to move on, Paul? Or
yeah, happy to move on unless anyone's got any questions. Okay, so Mark, given this relates to IR, do you want to talk the way through this one?
Yep, so this one's an example. Well, we'll let the first part of the play run through first. So this was one where there was no foul called on field. Depending on the quality of the stream you're getting in the share, you may not be able to see the actual contact with the receiver there. I'm certainly, it's on the stream I'm viewing here, it's very stuttery.
There's a little bit of a push in his back is what we can see.
Yep, that's right. And so that's one where there was no call on field for the push in the back for the OPI. But as you can see that around this time, the video judge radioed in to interrupt the play to do a formal review of that to create the foul.
So what philosophy do you run with the video judge up there, Mark?
Standard IFF. So if there's an obvious major foul, then the video judge can intervene to create the foul. It's a standard IFF rule 12.
Okay.
So this is one where it was sufficiently obvious on video that there was a foul. If it's not obvious, then it's not something that the video judge should choose to intervene on or to reverse an on-field decision. I'm hoping to, a bit later on in the year, in another of these sessions, do one of these sessions on video judge philosophies.
Careful, I'll hold you to that.
Can you put the audio on, Shane, for the announcement?
Offense number 85, 10-yard penalty from the previous spot. Repeat the down. Offense number 85, 10-yard penalty from the previous spot. Repeat the down.
If you're watching the clip on the YouTube link, one of the things you'll also note is that because the video judge intervention had happened after the play had been called, we had already lost the previous spot. The down marker had moved. So this was another example of where we had to go back to the video to establish what the previous spot was. And you'll be able to...
It was second down, wasn't it?
Yes.
If I got the second down.
I believe so.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I think I had lost track of what down it was by the time I had started my announcement. So I just said repeat the down rather than try to figure it out.
Okay.
And I also recall I corrected the 10 yards to 15 yards.
Yeah, you did.
Yes,
I remember
you
that's
did.
not in the clip, but you did. Yeah.
I'd be also interested to see if you remembered the ball placement, whether we went, I think that looks like it's on the, I'll call it position 1, closest to the camera. Would we have put the ball in the same spot?
Good point. I don't know, and I don't think we clipped it far enough ahead to look at the next play.
And this is the problem when it comes to clipping is, you know, a lot of times you can only get parts of plays, and then it's hard sometimes to link it. Where it's been material to the discussion, I've always tried to include the follow-on play. So, for example, where we think we might have got the penalty enforcement wrong, I try and include the next play as well. But sometimes it's easier said than done sometimes, but we try.
Actually, from memory, Paul was the video judge for this game.
I also seem to recall that whenever the video judge made a call that required us to go back, they would have already checked where the ball placement and where the yardage was, and generally relayed that down to us just so there'd be no issue. And that's something the video judge can do quite easily, I think.
So if we're looking at mechanics for that play, obviously the deep wing is obviously, he's fairly blocked out with the actual hands because it's between the defender and the offensive guy and the defensive guy. Would we be looking at the shallow wing for more help? Because if you have a look right there, he's not going to see what the hands are doing. Or is he, I mean, he probably might get a little bit of a glimpse, but it's a hard get for the deep wing, I guess.
Evening, guys. I'll chime in if you want. I'll own up. I was back judge for this game. Yeah, I didn't have the angle. That's exactly right. I just didn't have the angle.
I think both of them don't have the angle there, Shane. I think what's that? That's the side judge. Side judge up there doesn't quite have the angle either. I mean, you're probably looking more for help from the umpire, maybe.
Yeah,
so umpire doesn't get his head round in time. You can kind of see that.
So the linesman's going to be straight lined here on this one, and as you say, the side judge isn't quite at that 90-degree angle to have that look in and see the hands go in there. And from the back judge's position, it's not going to be an easy read either.
I think the side judge might be ball watching a little bit. Like, he looks like his eyes might be up as opposed to looking at the players, but it's not an easy angle to see from where he is.
Back judge could be shielded from number 5 coming across as well.
You're probably looking for more for the shallow wing to come through, wouldn't you? Now that he's picked up it's a deep pass, so the short receivers cleared. So obviously the guy in the flat, he's not looking there, so the shallow wing can try and get his eyes downfield to help out.
Yep. In an ideal world, absolutely.
And this is actually be a good illustration of the sorts of discussions that often eventuate from clips. Not things that we originally clipped the play for, but additional points that have been raised by the participants in the session, just like this.
And I think that's where we get a lot of the benefit out of these sessions, is going over the mechanics side of things. We could show false starts and offsides and show these are fouls, those are fouls, but more understanding of who's actually assisting and overlapping and looking and recognizing when to go from your key onto helping an official who may not have the best view.
Exactly.
And I know we have to concentrate on, just one play at a time, but all game long, the Ravens defensive backs were, well, let's just say over-exaggerating every bit of contact all game long from the Stingrays receivers. So when you get to a kind of a ticky-tacky call where you can't definitively see hands in the back, you're definitely not going to pull your flag out. I think they even tried to review, like back in the first quarter, OPI on a touchdown play, and that's when they blew their first review of the game. Yeah, you could argue kind of it was getting a bit complacent, like letting them play a bit too much. And yeah, you get to the third quarter and ultimately something like this happens.
Well, that's all for this session on video review. I hope you found it interesting. The purpose of this session was to look at video review and how it can help you or your officiating group to review and improve your performance. It highlights that we can make good use of technology for teaching purposes. In today's technology, we can make use of the resources worldwide. What we saw in tonight's session was filmed from 2020, where the film was selected in Darwin, analysed in Victoria, and presented from southern New South Wales to officials in Queensland. I think the key points we have made here tonight are: keep it regular, keep it to the point, and keep it positive. AGOA is going to be pursuing this as more quality video becomes available as a national method of improving consistency, supporting smaller officiating groups, and providing a more objective basis for selection. I would like to thank our presenters for putting this together tonight: Mark Louis, Shane Ossett, and Paul Mercer. Thanks to all of you. Our session tonight was attended by officials from Australia, New Zealand, and also Marco Sala of Instant Replay and IFAF Europe. Thanks to all of you for taking an interest as well. Our next session of Stay Engaged is on Tuesday 28th September, and the working title is The West Coast Football Philosophy from USA to AUS with Bob Barrett. Finally, I remind you that AGOA has an online presence on the web at www.ago.org.au. On Facebook at the Australian Gridiron Officials Association Facebook page, The Neutral Zone, and we have our AGOA Training and Development Group also on Facebook. If you are not a member, speak to your state training managers and join the discussion. Also, we have a YouTube channel, AGOA Videos, which you should already know about if you found this video. These sessions are currently conducted by Zoom every 2 weeks at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday nights, and then we create a video of the session and place it on YouTube. If you have any suggestions for further sessions, contact me on Facebook, or my email is miles.newman@ago.org.au. If you enjoyed this session, join us online next time. If you are rewatching this session that you participated in, come back next time and bring a friend. My name is Miles Newman. See you next time. Thanks for watching and stay engaged.